Okay, Cindy Lou Flowers asks, what happens to the souls of those who reject Hashem, to the ones who have committed heinous crimes, and to those who believe that they are worshipping the God of Israel, but aren't, for example, the Christians?
So I'll say this, and don't take this in a hyper-literal way, but in classical Jewish thought, it's none of our business. Okay, now that I said that in a way that sort of sounds very provocative, even though in some Christian circles everyone seems to know who's going to heaven, who's going to hell, Jews consider it to be completely arrogant to make those kinds of statements, even to think about such things. When we hear, God forbid, that someone has passed away, we say, Baruch Daino Emes, blessed be the true judge. Only God knows the heart. Only God knows what a person is truly thinking and what they really understand, and what pain they've endured, and what they've gone through. And then this young lady, when she was 12 years old, her body was violated by a close relative, and it hurt her and it injured her. Hashem takes your every pain into account. Hashem counts each and every star, and to each and every one of them He gives them a name. Hashem knows the pain you've endured. So what I'll say is this, is that of course if we would never punish our children for doing something that they didn't know any better, and if we'd be punishing 2-year-olds, the government would take away our children. If we punishing babies so of course God doesn't hold people accountable for what they did not know. So there's a basic principle that people are judged, of course, for those who are in rebellion against God. There's no question. And there is a place called hell, and if there wasn't, God would have had to invent it for people like Bin Laden, Yasser Arafat, and Hitler, and so on. But we have a Bible that tells us there would be no justice in the world if there was not heaven and hell, and those places are more real than the world we're in now. Because in those places there isn't Satan who is distracting us. There everything is clear. But we don't know what a person went through and so on. But I will say this, if you're in rebellion against God and you're saying, look, I'm going to believe in Jesus, I'm going to worship a man as God, even though I know the truth and I understand that, but I'm going to continue committing this adultery against God. Of course, Hashem tells us He's going to require it of you. But Hashem always tries to provide light and shine more light in your life. But there are many people who've not heard, don't understand, and they do the best they can. I want to make one other statement that I don't know that I've ever said this before, but I'll share it with you now. But it's something that I think about every day, pretty much. Many Christians are going to be upset with me, so I'm going to ask you not to be, because I'm just going to express something that I've observed in my life, because I spend a lot of time with Christians for the last 35 years, and it seems to me, I could be wrong about this, but it seems to me that many Christians will tell you they believe in the doctrine of the Trinity, and they believe that Jesus was God. They believe that. They'll tell you that. But in fact, if you really believe that, really almost none of the Christian Bible makes any sense. I mean, in John 5:30, when Jesus is saying, I can't do anything of my own, but of the one who sent me. I mean, how do you make sense of that if He and the Father are homoousia, of the same substance? So here's a thought that I've had for a very, very long time, and that is that Christians will say they believe in the Trinity, will tell you they do, will defend it up and down, but in reality, I think it's very clear to me that many, many Christians don't believe that. When they say they don't believe, they don't cognitively say this is a lie. They just don't worship that way. Like, for example, I don't really hear Christians praying, saying, "Oh, Jesus, creator of the universe." They talk that way about the Father, but not that way about Jesus, in a sense. So what I'm suggesting is that the doctrine that was finally hammered out in 325, what is the doctrine of the Trinity, this fully Nicene Creed, many Christians will sign on to that and say, "I believe that." But there's clearly a considerable number of Christians who say, Jesus is somehow subordinate to the Father. It's not that he humbled himself, as you'll find in Philippians. It's not that the Father is ultimately the great God, and Jesus is his servant, and he does the will of the Father. And therefore, now, so there is no doubt in my mind that there are Christians who just don't want to go to hell, so they'll defend it, and and they'll say they believe it, but they, in their heart of hearts, that's not what they're worshiping. That's not what's really going on. Now, so therefore, just carry this a step further. There is clearly a chasm between the group of Christians who do worship Jesus as God and really, really do, and those who say they do, but in reality and practice, they're not. Okay. Now, what is the extent of that delta? How great is that chasm? How large is that cleavage between those who say they believe but don't really believe, meaning they're not worshiping that way, and those who do? No one can know the heart. But I think many Christians say they believe in the Trinity, will tell you, they'll argue it to death. But do they? No, they see. That's why, I mean, when Jesus says, "Take this cup not of my will, but of your will," well, how do you make sense out of that if you believe really in the orthodoxy of the Trinity that was hammered out in the 4th century? It just doesn't make sense. What does the cry of dereliction even mean? I mean, who is he talking to? Who is Jesus praying to in John 17? This is like a long prayer. Who is he talking to, himself? It doesn't make sense. It's not about humility. It's they go, well, Jesus humbled himself. That's based on what's called the Carmen Christi. It's not a question of he humbled himself and so on. The point is, who was he talking to? And when he says he can do nothing of his own will, and there's a whole bunch of information the Father has that he doesn't have, it's so clear that the authors of the Christian Bible, we don't know who most of them were, believe that Jesus was absolutely subordinate to the Father, and everything that we see today as what is called Orthodox Christianity is in fact a much later development and was not the way early Christians believed.